All right, you accursed, whether glorious or miserable, we're back for our last show of the week, Friday morning of week 2. The Curse of Politics panel, Kory Teneycke, Jordan Leichnitz, Scott Reid. Hello, people. How are you this morning?
We are
tired.
Yeah.
Enthusiastic.
Yeah, exactly. We've got the energy. We've got it this morning. You know who's going to fire us up is Mickey from Politico. Hi, Mickey. How are you?
Good. That's a lot of pressure this early in the morning.
It is, but
Don't let us down.
Don't let us down. We need you today. Where are you? Let's start with that.
I'm in Oshawa. I checked out Poilievre's rally last night. It was massive. The party is tightly controlling the space, though. And there was a couple medical emergencies last night as well.
What do you mean tightly controlling the space?
Well, they didn't. Essentially, they were babysitting the national media. They didn't want us talking to anyone, either outside the rally or inside the rally, despite everyone wanting to talk to us. They want to spread their conservative message and values. But yeah, staffers were following us around, making sure we weren't talking to anyone or interrupting interviews we were doing. And just essentially babysitting us.
You make it sound like party drugs. You're going to spread their values and messages. Here, you try some, go in the bathroom, come back out, drink a lot of water. You're going to have a good night.
So what was the vibe?
Yeah, it was really good. A lot of people were excited. People in the crowd, they really want change. Affordability issues, huge for them. But you can tell that these things, they're like becoming like festivals. And you can tell these Hill staffers who are running them are kind of starting to, maybe not control the crowd as well. Like I mentioned, there was 4 people that either passed out twice. The crowd had to stop Poilievre and to stop his speech because people had fainted and they had to bring in paramedics. At least 2 people were taken away in ambulances. Women were asking if they could open doors because it was getting so hot in there. There was thousands of people crammed. These people were some standing hours before they even got there. So while it's a very massive event, vibes were very, very good. It seems like that there needs to be a little bit better control of the crowds once the space is situated with all these people.
There you go. Conservative events are now a health threat.
No, no, that's not what I said.
So just one last thing. What was the high point of the speech? What was the crescendo moment? Where did people fucking lose it in that 7,000 person audience?
Ooh, honestly, anytime he says his hits, greatest hits, boots, not suits, axe the tax. People love when he talks about cutting taxes, honestly. Whether it's, income tax, taking the GST off of vehicles, the crowd just goes crazy. They go wild. And people in the crowd were actually from all over the place. People were coming as far as Vaughan, Peterborough. So it wasn't just the Oshawa area. But I was talking to some people and they've been following him online for so many years. So he almost has Poilievre has this rock star status. So people were saying they were coming because they've been just following him along for so long and they just wanted to see him and hopefully meet him in person. And so everyone was really happy. Everyone was in a good mood and people feel like there's going to be some change in the next election.
Excellent. Pretty cool. Thank you for that rundown of the event. Mickey, can you just quickly tell us where the leaders are at today?
Yes. So starting with, oh my gosh, I have to look at my list. I don't know it off the top of my head. Leader Mark Carty, he's in Montreal and he's making an announcement this morning. And that in the afternoon, he's going to tour an auto manufacturing plant in Woodbridge, Ontario. And then he's going to hold a rally in Scarborough tonight at 6 p.m. And I kind of want to check it out because I just want to compare the vibes for that rally to what I saw yesterday, which was a huge rock concert. And then Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, he's holding a press conference in Trois-Rivières, Quebec today. And then NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is in Montreal, where he's going to be making some kind of announcement. And then he's going to be visiting local businesses throughout the day.
People at Carney rallies, they don't faint. They just take very, very precise notes.
Well, we'll see.
They're kind of a different energy.
I think the vibe will be different. Yeah.
All right. We'll look for your report on that on Monday. Mickey, have a great weekend. Thanks for your help all week.
Yeah, no problem. Bye.
All right, team, we have polling. Do you want it?
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe.
Polera polling is brought to you by Enbridge Gas, reliable, affordable natural gas to heat your homes and power our economy. All right, this is only this week. This is 1,600 cases derived from Monday through Thursday night. Decided vote, Liberal 44, down 1. CPC 36, up 3. NDP 10, down 1. BQ 6, flat. Green Party 3, flat. PPC 2, flat. Liberal lead. So the numbers are back to where they were about a week ago, but compared to a week ago, the Liberal lead in Ontario is larger at 17 points right now, and a little bit smaller than it was in Quebec at 15 points right now. NDP showing some life in British Columbia, apparently at 20 points out there now. One last thing, the Polera did a open-ended question after the vote, and they asked people an open-ended question about why they were voting for the party that they are, and they turned it into a word cloud. And if you're voting Liberal, the word cloud is dominated by 2 words, Carney and Trump. And if you're voting Conservative, the word cloud is dominated by 2 words, Liberal and change. So there you go.
Right.
Thank you, Polera. Dan Arnold, for another day of polling. So let's start off with you, Scott. I don't have any specific agenda today. Let's just do a roundtable. What did you see yesterday that interested you?
What did I see that interested me? I thought that the Prime Minister was in his full element again as Prime Minister. And I think I didn't get to watch the event live, so I went back and watched it online afterward. And it's a sense of comfort that he has when he throws on those robes. And once again, yesterday, it felt like everybody kind of got pushed to the margins. Uh, um, and I thought Polyev, I watched Polyev's stuff live, and speaking of crowd size, when Mickey was talking about, it was a little odd because thing in Kingston, it started with him saying to this reporter, the first reporter was a local reporter, and in the first Q&A, and Polyev says, "Did you see that crowd last night?" "Yep." "Really big, eh?" "Yes, sir." "No, but really big. I bet they haven't had a crowd that big in a long time, eh?" "Yes, sir." "Do you think Sir John A. Macdonald got crowds that big?" Like it was, I don't know. It wasn't needy. Like it wasn't Trumpy in the sense of like, but it was odd. And then smiling with like, as though somebody had written like on his notes, and don't forget to smile when you ask some strange questions. Anyway, to me, if the Conservatives, these numbers are interesting because I think if you're the Conservatives, you surely have to be saying to yourself, now's it. Now is the moment. Like now is the time. Like we've gotten past the April 2nd Liberation Day. We've had the formal reaction of the premiers and business leaders. Not to say that other things can't happen, but now's the time to close the gap. Now's the time to reverse this to a more conventional campaign. Other issues can assert themselves where your superior organizational and oratorical skills can try to take center. Like these next 4 or 5 days, they really have to make a move. And I think the thing to watch for, from my perspective, will be one, when Carney comes back to the campaign trail, are those little blemishes that didn't hurt him, but we all believe will hurt eventually, are they smoothed out? And two, is Trump going to barge back in? Because there's a lot, I think there's a concern coming out of the Prime Minister's office that Trump will come back with additional tariffs next week on sector-specific tariffs. And if so, does that send this thing into a swirl again, force the Prime Minister back to Ottawa, and more to the point, force the other leaders onto the sideline bleachers again?
The choice for Canada's energy future, as we seek to further decarbonize and secure our national electricity grid, is clearly our own made-in-Canada can-do large reactor technology. Can-dos have been powering the Canadian economy, families, and industry for more than 60 years. Our existing can-do reactors are being refurbished, updated, and modernized for today's needs and standards to run another 30 years, on time and on budget. But that's not enough. There is a need to build new large can-dos across the country to help grow our economies with clean baseload power. The Conference Board of Canada will tell you the economic stimulus of that investment will be well worth it. Can-dos use natural uranium fuel, mined and prepared right here at home. No imported enriched fuel needed. That means Trump tariff-proof energy security and reliability. Can-dos also provide vast quantities of life-saving medical isotopes used in hospitals right across the country. Can-dos are more than 90% Canadian, built and run with great-paying union jobs. And credit where credit is due. The province of Ontario and OPG have made the necessary investments in small modular reactors. These will be needed in more remote locations in the future. But it doesn't stop there. Today, the next generation large reactors are being planned for investment in many parts of the country, starting in Ontario. Can-Do Energy and their employees are proud to be leading that effort. Can-Dos, designed by Canadians, built by Canadians, for the benefit of Canadians. Let's power through. Jordan, what were you looking at yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I was watching Polyev. And I think we can safely say, yeah, there's a firm pivot in the attempt right now. And if you had any doubt, just check the podium art, guys. I don't know if you noticed, but they've dropped the slogan podium art and they have this very vintage maple leaf instead. So that's the sign that we're seeing their version of Prime Minister Polyev. And I was struck yesterday, and I watched both his morning remarks and then the rally. And, he's trying to put out something, I think, a little bit meatier on the tariffs. And we can discuss, I think, how much sense some of those policy prescriptions make, because I'm not sure that there's really much difference there between the parties. But I think, to me, he's still struggling tonally. There is a sense of negativity around how he speaks about the issue. And I think in part because the last attack that they're really keeping in that message is this Trump wants Carney to win thing. And I understand why, but the challenge is that I don't really think that it meets the nod test for anybody, and it does infuse his message with, again, his own voice as an attack dog. So it's an interesting choice to keep it in there. And I also thought last night at the rally, and it should be said, 6,000 people in Oshawa, that's amazing. These crowds are massive. And if you're in a tight fight, that's a lot of canvassers. I don't know if they're canvassing though, but it's a lot of canvassers, right? It was such an interesting thing to watch the sort of tension between Polyev and I think Mickey actually said this really well. Polyev, the online persona, almost, and the people who had come to see that, and what he's attempting to do with the campaign and that shift. So you saw him in the rally last night talk about Trump in a more direct way than he has in his past rallies. And he didn't lose the crowd, but it was not the winner in the room, right? It was, people were sort of patiently waiting for him to get back on to his other stuff. And he didn't do the World Economic Forum, but he did guns, he did crime, he did, those types of things. And they got, a good reception. But I think the moment that was interesting for me there was you had somebody hand him an apple at a certain point, and he did the, how do you like them apples thing. And this is it. These are people meeting an online celebrity. He's an online persona to them.
Can you chew it and be shitty to me? Because that's what gets me off.
And he did, and to what Scott was saying, he did, that weird banter he had with the media in the morning about crowd size. He repeated it on stage that evening as well. The ask the media, have you ever seen a crowd this big? And I think it's really fascinating because you can see the huge effort that is going in to trying to inoculate on the Trump front, to trying to get over that bar on credibility, on seriousness, on all of those things. and all the forces that are pulling him back into those greatest hits, into that online persona that that a lot of potentially swing voters see as fairly negative, and also his own comfort in that persona. Like, he likes being that person. He's into it. And so I thought that was really interesting in full display yesterday. I thought Carney did fine. Like, Prime Minister Carney, he was kind of like in his full technocrat glory. And I was struck watching, I was like Scott, I was on calls all morning. So I ended up watching the morning announcements back to back. And, Carney's speaking style is made for these moments. He measures his words. He's used to having his words weighed. He sounds incredibly reassuring. And I can't help but think that for the voters that are solely looking for that, like, they're gonna go for what they view as the real thing, right? That and I herein is the conundrum for sure for the Conservatives. The previous version of Poilievre was not enough to hold their vote coalition together, but the new version might not be enough either. So Anyway, I thought it was an interesting day yesterday for both Carney and Poilievre.
Kory, there's something super basic in that word cloud thing that Poilievre did. And that is that Liberal voters don't say Liberal as the reason why they're voting Liberal. They say Trump and they say Carney.
Yeah.
Right? So that makes the job for the Conservatives pretty crystal clear. They've got to remove Carney as a reason, don't they?
Yeah, I think so, but I also think, and this is something we've talked about a lot of times, talking about a Liberal fourth term, I think, is also on point. Like, I think the Liberal brand and the Liberal government are both liabilities for their campaign.
Yeah.
If I were to boil the question down that seems to be emerging, it's maybe not one ballot question. Maybe it's two competing ballot questions. Maybe it's change versus stability.
Right.
And for millennials and younger voters, the affordability message is particularly poignant. Whether it's housing prices, whether it's sort of the broken deal that they have inherited, as opposed to the normal social contract of, you work hard, you get an education, you get a good job, you get a house, you get, et cetera, et cetera. And older voters who are looking at, the world that has really, the foundations of the world that we've had since World War II are crumbling all around them. And it's disconcerting. And the fearfulness associated with Trump is much more acute. So I think there's those two competing things. Would all be interested, because I do think the front line of this fight is Ontario, and I think the tariffs on autos are devastatingly bad for the province, and I think the steel and aluminum tariffs are disproportionately going to be felt in Ontario. We're going to see additional tariffs coming. In all likelihood, lumber, copper, pharmaceuticals. A lot of that is going to land on Ontario as well. And whether or not that, pushes some of those younger voters who are more animated by change and affordability issues, whether that pushes them into the Liberal ballot question area of, stability and response to Trump, or whether that stuff subsides and gets back more to the 2024 ballot question. And I think it's these dueling ballot questions, particularly in the most populous province, that's going on, and that's what I'm going to be watching. Look, having 6,000 people in Oshawa, that's huge. That is huge, and I think that speaks to what may be an enthusiasm gap between those who want change versus those who want stability, and that could have an influence on what voter turnout is. I think the demographics that the Conservatives hold right now are typically less likely to turn out, but we're seeing signs of greater enthusiasm. I think in part driven, I sense that in part driven by the rallies and other things that are going on, is probably being higher for the Conservatives. But it feels like a tug of war, the Liberal numbers are very high in Ontario right now, and we'll see what happens over the next week. Like either like our tracking polling today, we see some softening of that and some lift for the Conservatives.
Yep.
Looks like in those tracking numbers, it's not in Ontario, but I think the regional numbers in these tracking polls are not terribly reliable. We'll see what happens. If you see the Conservative votes start to grow in Ontario, I think that's a sign that the change ballot is starting to kick in, which is clearly what they're banking on. And if we see the Liberals continue to maintain the support they have or see growth, then it means that the effects of the Trump tariffs are proving to be dominant. And that's what I'm going to be looking for, all next week.
Isn't there, David?
It's sort of a classic party versus leader thing, right? Because the Liberal Party brand is very weak and it doesn't show up in the word cloud about why Liberals are voting Liberal. It does show up in the word cloud as to why Conservatives are voting Conservative. On the other hand, Poilievre doesn't show up in the Conservative word cloud.
Yeah. And also,
right?
like,
Carney
I
is
think
dominant in the Liberal word cloud. So it's Carney versus Conservative.
It's an acknowledgement
Right.
also, I think, for a lot of progressive voters that Liberal is like a default setting, too.
There are a lot of people who are voting Liberal right now who are not Liberals.
That's right.
Is I think the reality, especially in places like Ontario, but also in Quebec, right? When you look at this, like the Liberals have gone from almost nowhere to soaring heights in those two provinces in a record amount of time. That's not the Liberal Party. That's Mark Carney. But I don't know. There's so many rules that are being broken in this election campaign. These races tend to presidentialize. It tends to be leader versus leader. If your leader is trailing your ballot tends to pull down. If it's your leader's above your party ballot, it tends to pull it up. But we're not necessarily seeing that with the Conservatives, right? Like, Poilievre trails the ballot, but it doesn't seem to be pulling them down as much as you would think that would be the case. And Carney is doing well despite deep misgivings about the Liberal Party as a whole and giving it a fourth mandate.
Last night, the other thing we didn't touch on is he did Saint Chef, and by all accounts, he passed. Like, I don't, like you're not seeing a lot of news about it insofar as he didn't face plant. He didn't sound like, he was, pure lane Frenchman or anything like that. But
he spoke French.
His French was it was observably better.
Yeah. So that's important. But, on this point that you're making, David, to me, it raises a question about advertising, whether we're going to see really strong competing strategies on advertising in, say, the next 10-ish days between now and, say, the debate. And I say that because when I watch one of those ads, when one of the Liberal ads comes on, you see Carney, Carney, Carney. And then at the end, the screen goes red and the word Liberal appears. And you almost go, ooh, fuck, I wish they didn't have to do that part, right? Like, yeah, it was rolling there, right?
Yeah.
Don't harsh it. But will you see the Conservatives, because they need to make up ground and because they have a kind of a Trump opening, maybe, we don't know. Maybe the worries of the world may weigh on this campaign too, as we start seeing like economic bombs go off everywhere. But they have an opening, and so do they reassemble their media buy and go heavy negative on Carney and use the Liberal word and the Liberal association? Try to do that, get some momentum, really try to bring Carney a little bit down to earth, beat him up and bruise him up and liberalize him, so to speak, between now and the debates. Whereas maybe the Liberals, you would think, would probably want to marshal and hold their fire for post-debate, thinking, well, what if those debates don't go perfectly? If Poilievre mangles him in English, or if his French isn't great, at Radcan, like, and so do you end up seeing a different thing where for like the next week, the Conservatives will be heavy, the Liberals will be a little lighter, and could that affect the dynamic?
I don't know what they're going to do, but I mean, it is pretty clear how fragile this Liberal thing is, right? If the Carney mystique cracks, the Conservatives are going to get their 200 seats back.
Yeah, it's
right.
The thing is kind of.
Well, I think mystique around
you guys reacted badly. Maybe I used the wrong word or something. What I'm saying is Carney is the reason for the Liberal.
It's the two things you said. It's Carney and Trump, right? And we talked about going into this week, that this would be one of two potential big pivot points, right?
Yep.
One is what happens on Liberation Day. And I think the tale of that is still being told. We're not entirely sure. But this is clearly the Conservatives, despite saying we're not pivoting and focusing more on Trump, clearly have. And they've toned down some of the other things that we've talked about around, some of the zanier, the issues that had worked their way into the narrative. So I think that's happened. But, the change in affordability and all of that for a certain part of the electorate, that is still there, and that's with the Conservatives. So I don't know. I think it's going to depend a lot on what happens with Trump. If the reciprocal tariffs that we put on autos elicit another volley from the Americans, that's probably good. For Carney, and then it's going to pull the news and the ballot back towards Trump and all of that for another week. If that sort of subsides and there isn't a response, and it's just let's wait and see what happens in the CUSMA negotiations, I think there's going to be a lot more space in the news and for the electorate to focus on the things that the Conservatives want to talk about. So, we'll see what happens with that, and then we'll see what happens with the debates. And I think still in the debates, as just a pure debater, I don't know. I would be scared as hell to get in the ring in a debate against Poilievre. He's a killer in that environment. But
that isn't how debates are judged, right? And you, I mean, it's
I think for his voters,
you got to be likable. You got to be all kinds of things.
I think debates are going to be such an interesting moment for Poilievre because it's an inflection point for his strategy, right? I think if we see the Poilievre that we have seen, up until 2 days ago, I'm not sure that works for him. I think the negativity and the heavy personal attacks are feeding negatives that are driving, and particularly female voters, away from him. So he has a challenge because he does need to bring the fight to Carney. He needs to go after him, but he needs to do it in a way that is not, belittling and alienating. And frankly, I think for him, if you look at his historical performance in those settings, that's a pretty tough setting to get him into.
It'd be a high stakes.
Yeah, and
that's the trick, though, right? It's what you just said, Jordan. That's the trick. You've got to bring Carney down. I think you got to associate him with the Liberal Party, but you can't do it in a way that you come off as such a prick that nobody wants to vote for you at the end of it.
No, right, but most of that's got to be with paid.
He can't carry that.
But they're not doing that so far. They are having him carry that still. So.
Yeah, which is strange. But there's one other factor, of course, that can intervene in the next few days, and that is, and you've mentioned this many times, David. That's Danielle Smith, and she can create cross-cutting pressure. She was at the Chamber of Commerce event, didn't get a lot of pickup. She was at that Chamber of Commerce event yesterday in Alberta, and she basically said, flat out, just said, look, she doubled down on this was more or less a win, and said, look, the countervailing tariffs from Canada are going to do more harm to Alberta's economy than Trump's tariffs. And at some point, she's capable of saying something in these next handful of days that will force Poilievre to either defend her or cut her loose and Sister Soldier on it. And so far, he's really shown a reluctance to Sister Soldier. So, yeah. I mean,
that's an opportunity for him too, I would argue.
Well, he did on Preston Manning. Manning.
He did. So we'll see. But
he needs proof points. He needs proof points that he is making a shift on that, and she is arguably the greatest.
Right. All right, let's wrap it up. Let our listeners go off and hit the doors. Do some canvassing. Who wants to start off with a blessing or a curse? I'm counting on you, Jordan.
Yeah, you know I did my homework.
Yeah.
So my blessing is it's actually going out to Radio Canada for the 5 Chef format. It was great. Like, it was really, I thought, an excellent alternative to fill the gap of the TVA debate. You got to see the leaders answer some tough questions. You got a sense of personality. I think that TV like that is, frankly, like a great service for voters. And if you haven't had a chance to check it out, if you're able to listen French, I think people should. It was very, very illuminating.
Great. Thank you. Scott?
My curse is on a bunch of the conservative media, sort of the conservative-esque media that are kicking around. You're starting to see this kind of bleed. I sent you guys one video yesterday. You're starting to see this bleed of, you know what, these crowd sizes are huge, and maybe you can't trust these polls. What's happening doesn't meet the eye test, and it's all bullshit. Maybe this thing is rigged. Maybe there's, like, you're starting to get into this territory of like real loser talk where people are like, I don't think people get it. He's winning. The 6,000 people in Oshawa means that he's actually got the country. And I would just say you're not doing your cause any good when you start telling people to believe their own bullshit. Conservatives have to win this campaign. They're gonna have to do it from behind now. And you don't do it by saying, actually, we are winning. You just don't know it. So fuck you. That won't work.
Excellent. All right, Kory?
Well, I'll do a blessing to all the auto workers out there, because I think it's going to be a really, really tough week.
A high ground blessing. I mean,
a high ground.
God damn you,
look,
Kory.
I'm that's the kind of guy I am. But really, I think it's I think it's pretty anxiety ridden in southwestern Ontario right now. And it's all about that. And I think there are a lot of communities, and there are a lot of people's ability to feed their family and pay their mortgage and all of that's hanging in the balance right now. And so we'll see what happens over the next week, maybe even over the weekend. We could know by Monday what the U.S. response will be. But I think there's going to be a lot of anxiety there, and so my blessings with all those folks.
Hear, hear.
Yeah. All right, my curse goes out to Preston Manning. In my view, a man who'd already wreaked a lot of damage to the Canadian political system, but I didn't know he was going to end his time in politics with a call for separatism. And I'm just appalled at the notion that somebody like him would write a piece saying that if the election goes a certain way, the West can and should separate. So there you go. Curse to you, Preston Manning. All right, folks, that's our show for this week. We're taking the weekend off to relax. We'll see you on Monday morning bright and early. I want to thank our sponsor, CanDo, and our polling sponsor, Enbridge, and all of you folks who are working so hard on the campaign and giving a shit what we say. So take care of yourselves. Have fun, and we'll see you on Monday.